You're listening to the Served Up Show, a podcast that features inspiring beverage professionals and topic experts that share their passions through meaningful content. Your hostesses, Bridget Albert, is best known as the Market Fresh Mixologist, an industry mentor with over 25 years of experience. And I'm Julie Milroy, best known for my passion for leading change and helping others grow in their careers. Grab a cocktail and sit back. Let's learn how we can make a positive impact in our industry.
Hey y'all, it's Bridget here. I had the pleasure of chatting with my new friend, Joe Wagner. Joe is the founder of Copper Cane Wines and Provisions, a fifth-generation Napa Valley winemaker. Joe has been immersed in every aspect of the wine industry his entire life, learning the ropes from his dad, Chuck, who co-founded Caymus Vineyards with his parents in 1972. Joe learned a great love for cultivating the land, tending the grapevines, the art of winemaking, the strength of a good work ethic, and leading by example. Joe and I share a lot of laughs in this episode as he shares his journey into winemaking. So sit back, relax, grab yourself your favorite Copper Cane wine, and enjoy this really fun show. Joe, welcome to Served Up. I'm so excited to have you on the show today.
Thank you very much for having me. I am excited to tell our story and ask whatever, nitty-gritty questions you want to get into.
All right. Well, let's get into it. Can you tell our listeners really just about your beginnings? Where did you grow up? Tell me about your past. Did you go to college? How did you wind up in the wine world?
All right. Well, I'll try to make this as succinct as possible, but it is a bit of a long story. I'll actually go back to before me growing up. So my family immigrated into Napa, where we currently live, back in the 1850s. And they started planting grapes, making wine, and they had a pretty good run of it up until Prohibition shut them down. At the time, they were, grapes were a big part of the economy in the area, very much an agricultural area. And they were selling their wine more in a bulk manner to San Francisco, which was kind of a hustling and bustling city at the time, post gold rush. So they had a good run of it. When they were shut down, they resorted to prunes and walnuts, and they kept on making wine at home and growing some grapes and selling them to other wineries. So they weren't making ends meet in the late 60s. And my grandfather, Charlie Wagner, along with my grandmother, Lorna, and my dad, Chuck, they decided they were either going to sell the farm or they were going to try their hand in the wine business once again. And so in 1972, they released their first vintage of Caymus Vineyards. And that in itself is its own story. But over the years, they refined what they were doing, realized that Cabernet was king in this part of the world, and focused their efforts there. And so, fast forward a couple decades, I was born in 1982 and born in Rutherford, very small town. If you blink as you're driving on Highway 29, you'll miss it. And a very rural community, very much an agrarian community, which back in those days, tasting rooms weren't a big thing. Wine tourism was just starting to evolve. And I remember the complete evolution of it from the 80s through to today. And it's really quite an amazing feat to where it has come. So, ran around the vineyards when I was younger, about 12 years old. I started working in the vineyards. And then about 15 years old, started working in the winery whenever I got a chance. It wasn't like an option. It was kind of like, it was still very much family owned, family operated. And so I, at that time, didn't think that I'd be getting into the wine business. I just knew that it was a job and family needed more workers. And so I could get out there, make a little money. And little did I know, I was learning quite a bit during those early years. So about 19 years old, I actually was going to college. I took a semester off. And I moved to, of all places, Mexico in the Sonoran Desert near the city of Hermosillo, and started farming table grapes down there. The largest export market for us was here in the U.S., followed by the EU and then Asia. Learned a ton about growing grapes in that period of time. And during that time that I lived down there, I realized that I wanted to get back into grapes and wine. And having gotten into other industries, I realized how wonderful this industry was. You have agriculture, you've got artistry and winemaking, along with chemistry and some industrial aspects like bottling. And then you also have the marketing and sales piece of it, which is, a whole different ball of wax. But nonetheless, there are so many facets to this business that it keeps you busy, especially if you're always, wanting to do something different, try new things. And rather than just sit behind a desk, there's a lot of opportunity for, say somebody with undiagnosed ADHD. So, so I moved back from Mexico and started working for my dad. And I had planted my first Pinot Noir vineyard when I was 15, actually, with another guy named Charlie out on the far Sonoma coast. And that was just a summer job working for my dad. And so that was, mid-late 90s. And so the grapes were coming in for that. And they really didn't have a home. We also had some other Pinot Noir from Santa Barbara County, Santa Maria Valley specifically, that was coming in. And it didn't have a home. And my dad just said, do you want to, try this? Try making these wines. And I thought, yeah, sure, I'll give it a shot. And asked him a ton of questions, tried everything under the sun, and eventually created a wine that we felt was, worth bringing to market. And then we started looking at branding and creating, something that was meaningful to us. And so Belle Gloss was my first start in the wine business as far as a brand. And when I began it, it was kind of like, what is something meaningful to the family, something meaningful to our history? And my grandmother, Lorna Belle Gloss, she was a huge inspiration to us. She loved Pinot Noir, and she was, I think, very much deserving of having a brand that reflected her passion and her history. So we named it Belle Gloss and started there and began with one vineyard designate in the 2001 vintage, and then started doing a second vineyard designate with 2002, and kind of continued to evolve. And the rest is history. We now have, about a half a dozen vineyard designates, and created a portfolio that we call Copper Cane Wines and Spirits now. We have really, 5 main brands and a few other small offshoots. And then we just delved into spirits as well, with some bourbon, rye, single malt, brandy, and apple brandy. So it's really been a fun run, and I don't think that it's anywhere near the end of it. We're growing at a great clip right now. We have the ability and capacity to do that, and continuing to plant 200 to 300 acres of vineyard a year. Continue to invest in our facilities. We have a tasting experience in downtown Napa, which is quite a bustling little community now. So lots of fun stuff going on, but there's always the view of what is next. So always keeping an eye on that. But overall, really happy with where we're at, and really happy that people are enjoying the wines and spirits.
Yeah, it's such a cool story because I love. I mean, it is truly a family effort, right? You grew up in this. This is what you know and what you love to do, what you were taught, and from your ancestors. I mean, it's absolutely incredible.
Sorry, I was actually just thinking that it's a great thing to get into, is that in the wine business, it's one of those things you can learn without having to get a college degree. We've actually found that when we bring on people on the winemaking team that have a college degree, they oftentimes are stuck in a box. They have learned the theory of winemaking, and they don't understand that it's a very fluid practice. It's not just a job, it's a hobby. I mean, a lot of people make wine in their garage just as a hobby. Once you understand the dynamics of fermentation and basics of grape growing and aging, et cetera, there are so many different ways you can go. I mean, we have, 14,000 or so different individual wine products on the market in the United States. That's a boatload of options for any consumer out there. And I look at that as, there's very few other industries that have that many options for a consumer. The only one I can relate it to is the restaurant industry, where, it's an easy thing to just disregard a brand, whether that's a restaurant or wine. If you say this vintage is not good, I'm not going to go back to this product. If your tacos weren't good at a restaurant, I'm not going to go back there. I'm going to try a new one. Easy to trade out. So consistency is key in both of those worlds. But I think that the exploration part of it for the consumer is what's so wonderful. You can get into Riojas and find one you like, and then start going down that path and trying a whole bunch of Riojas. And then you end up traveling to the Rioja region. And once you're there, you're bound to have a great time, because wherever wine is, there seems to be, a beautiful landscape, great culture of food and music, and good wine. So I think wine tourism is going to become and continue to be a very strong segment of our industry.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, right? I mean, look at just in your own backyard, the tourism, right, has absolutely exploded. And can you talk about how wine has changed? You briefly mentioned it because you've been in the business now for quite some time, since you were born, basically. You've been in the industry. And all the changes that you've really seen when it comes to making wine. Can you talk a little bit maybe about the innovation or what has changed and what has really stayed the same?
Yeah. So, I'll start with kind of the higher level stuff. Technology has infiltrated every aspect of our worlds. So in farming as well, we're much more dialed into every single vine, every single block. Able to manage those vineyards much more efficiently and at a higher level because of technology and having your smartphone and having it pull up, whatever data it is. How's your soil profile looking? Where's your, what's your moisture content? How are your vines holding up? You have imaging that tells you, where you're at as far as, are you low on nitrogen in your vineyards? Do you need to plant more cover crop that's nitrogen fixating for the next year? So there's a ton of that stuff, and it's also, goes into the winery. As far as that piece of it, that's very cool. It all adds up to big changes in quality, I think, overall. But when it comes down to the fundamentals of it, when I first started, it was very much a basic practice of, you grow your grapes, you choose when you're going to pick. And typically that was based off of sugar levels. Over time, we evolved, and I realized that it's not about sugar levels because physiological maturity trumps sugar. And every year is different. Some years you have an easy way of getting sugar accumulation, like a light crop and heat spikes, but you don't have that hang time that develops all of those characters on the vine and really creates the style and character of the wine. So we started looking at the physiological attributes only. And so we're picking at different levels of sugar every year in every block, not by a large margin, but still, slight variance every year. And that decision is all based on lignification of the seeds and the canes themselves. So the name that we have for our portfolio, Copper Cane Wines and Spirits, is just that. That is one of the kind of foundational components of what make our wines the way that they are. And it is that green succulent tissue that comes out in spring. And then as ripening begins, it goes from green to a pale yellow to eventually a copper color. We want to see that copper color migrate all the way up that cane, which could be 50, 60 inches long. And that tells me that there's a purging of the green in the vine and a purging of the green in the wine. So that is one fundamental change that began kind of early 2000s. And I saw a lot of that stuff, beginning in table grapes and then relating it to winemaking, especially with Pinot Noir, because Pinot Noir is so erratic when it comes to crop yields. You can have 4 tons an acre one year, you can have a half a ton an acre the next year. So how do you keep consistency in your style if you're picking based off of one sugar parameter and you have a very different way of ripening within those seasons? So that's one item. And then the next I'd say is we happened upon this by accident. We call it cryo extraction. And that, as it sounds, we use freezing methods to extract more deeply into the skins. So many people don't know that if you take a red grape and you squeeze it, you're going to get clear juice. So all of your color compounds, your phenolic compounds, those mouthfeel components, those are all trapped in the skins predominantly. So when we first started, it was all about the cold soak. You do a 5-day, 7-day, 10-day cold soak, softens up the skins. Well, I was doing a fermentation in bins, and our way of cooling them down if the fermentation got too warm was to use dry ice. And dry ice is just carbon dioxide in its solid form. So it has its cooling effect and then dissipates into CO2 gas. So realize that those lots that went out, went too high on temperature, got dosed with dry ice, they were so opulent and lush and rich and so expressive. And we started looking into how that dry ice was affecting the fruit and the character of the wine. And we realized that it's rupturing the cell walls within the skins and giving us better access to those phenolic and color compounds so that we can better extract what Mother Nature gave us. And it gives us a fleshier wine, more front weight, more mid palate, and really allows the wine to show through rather than relying on, other winemaking practices like, a heavy heavy oak profile. So that was an evolution. We continue to expand. We continue to experiment. I will say one thing for my team, and this kind of goes back to the formal education versus the on-the-job education. So everybody that works on the winemaking team, with the exception of one, nobody came up in winemaking. The guy that I rely upon most, his name is John Lopez. He started with me around 2004, and he actually used to be a juvenile probation officer, and he did not like his job. He wanted to get into something new. He started with washing bins, washing barrels, worked his way up. I would invite him in for blending sessions and talk to him about stuff, and he just took a love to the industry. And so as he continued on, he became an integral part of our business. And so now he is the director of winemaking. Again, no formal training. Same thing with, I've gotten, guys that were literally 18 years old and they've worked up to be cellar masters, and they've got families and they're just hustling. And I trust those guys for, with everything. And so I think that seeing that and what I always hope to instill with my team is something that I think my dad instilled with me was, never rest on your laurels, always try something new. There's always more that can be done, meaning you can never have a perfect wine. So, when I look at our team that we have now, I want them to screw up. And if they don't stick a fermentation once a year or more, then I feel like they're not trying enough. And I think that giving the team that power is so important to the quality of our wines and the consistency of our wines and the evolution of our wines. Because if you think about it from the perspective of, if I was a proprietor and I hired on a winemaker and I didn't know much about winemaking, and this winemaker, ruined a fermentation that cost, $200,000 in fruit, that winemaker might lose his job. Well, in California, it's legal to add water to your must, which I am not a fan of. I think it dilutes the product, and it's an easy way to go so that you don't get a stuck fermentation. So I want to always encourage my team to push the limits. If we have 28 bricks coming in, which is relatively high sugar, meaning high alcohol, I want to ferment that through. And if we don't make it, then that's all right. As long as we tried and did everything we could. And generally speaking, I'd say 90+% of the time it's a win and it's worth that risk. And so I want our winemaking team to always do that so that we can maintain the character and style of the wines that we want. So I think that is one fundamental difference as well for us, where, the evolution continues, the experimentation continues, and it filters out into the industry, whether we like it or not. If we create something that's proprietary, there's a high likelihood that we have a vendor that we're working with for whatever that is, whether it's dry ice or, a new type of barrel, like a hybrid barrel between American and French oak, and how we're toasting it and that sort of thing, because it's inherently, the salesperson or the person that is representing that product goes out and says, hey, Copper Cane is doing this, and they seem to be having success. They bought 10 barrels last year. They're buying 100 barrels this year. Maybe you should give it a shot. So secrets are only secrets for like 3 years in this industry because of that.
You're so right.
which also puts a requirement upon us to make sure we're continuing to evolve so we can stay ahead of the curve, and, not just create products that I think people love, but also, lead the industry in some ways. And that's something we're very proud of.
As you should be very proud of. Your wines are rated very high. Can we get into, your actual portfolio? And would love for the audience to know about the different brands of, the wines that you have with Copper Cane, and going into the spirits as well, because we do have a lot of cocktail nerds that listen to this show. Yeah,
absolutely. I'll start off with the wines. First off, we're about 30 SKUs right now. And of those 30, it's about 9 or 10 of them that do about 80% of our business.
Sure.
So it's a very consolidated portfolio. I don't want to have 100 SKUs or 300 SKUs and have this massive book. Because if you have that much stuff, there's no way you can prioritize. Right. Something's going to fall through the cracks. And so we just want to stay very focused on what we do. We don't want to have any overlap. We want each wine to have a reason for being. And that's kind of how we've evolved the portfolio. So starting with Belglas, we have, a number of different single vineyard expressions with Belglas. And the reason for that is, simply Pinot Noir is, I think, the best vehicle to take, I should say, maybe transcend what Mother Nature gave us, that terroir, that soil, that climate, that clone, that aspect of the slope, that trellising, all that stuff involved. Pinot Noir does best at expressing that. And so when you're seeing the same winemaking philosophy between, say, 6 different wines, you're truly seeing what Mother Nature gives in each one of those areas. So Belglas continues to focus on that. We did just release our first Chardonnay out of Santa Rita Hills, which we're very excited about. But our lead wines within Belglas are the Clark and Telephone Vineyard from Santa Maria Valley, the Dairyman Vineyard from Russian River Valley, the Las Alturas Vineyard from Santa Lucia Highlands. There's about 150 miles between those 3, and you really get to explore, through the glass, what the differences are in each one of these appellations, in each one of these individual vineyards. When it comes to our Napa project, starting in 2013, I began a wine that we call the Napa Valley Quilt. And as the name suggests, it is the patchwork of Napa Valley. We're working in 7 of the sub-appellations of Napa Valley to create this, cohesive cult style of Cabernet, and making it something that is more, I should say, accessible. I know it's still not a cheap date, but for a quality Napa Cabernet to retail at $50 or by the glass at $20, it is something that has just screamed success because of the level of quality that's in that bottle at that price point. So we're going to continue to do that. And personal vendetta of mine here is that, the ego is involved in Napa Cab, and it's like, oh, I've got this winemaker and this vineyard manager, and I'm going to charge $200 on my first release. And I'm sitting here thinking, like, that is not good for the wine industry. We don't need to build those walls of elitism back up. We need to break those walls down further than even Robert Mondavi did for, all of the decades that he pushed for it. Right. And get more people into drinking fine wine. So it is a little frustrating, but that was part of Quilt. That was part of the objective, was to do the opposite of what Napa's doing right now. So we with Quilt, which is also, one of the first brand names we've created that people can pronounce first try.
Wait, let's just stop right there. Thank you for that. It's amazing.
And so everybody's like, where do you get your brand names? They all have a story, of course. With Quilt, we also have a Chardonnay. It's kind of our biggest, most forward buttery oaky Chardonnay. We got a red blend called Fabric of the Land, our reserve called the Grace of the Land. And we do a small run of Sauvignon Blanc, or I should say Fumé Blanc. It's got some barrel aged and some Semillon in it. So that's been a ton of fun. That project is really just gone gangbusters since we released it. I was really happy with it, and it's still, there's no end in sight as far as where it can go. And it is like 70% on premise, which I think is a overly healthy mix in the on premise. And before I get into the other brands, I think I should really explain that philosophy, because that philosophy of a balance between on and off premise is one of the reasons I created Copper Cane, to facilitate that and to make sure that we had the opportunity to bring new people or more people into fine wine. And so in most markets, wherever we can, we have channel pricing, as we call it. So, while a bottle of Belglas might go to a retailer at $37 or so wholesale, it will go to a restaurant if it's being poured by the glass at $20 wholesale. And so that gives and we have the same pricing on Quilt as an example, but that gives the person in the restaurant, say the wine buyer, confidence that they're going to be able to put that glass on the list at $18 or $20. They're going to make money. They're going to have satisfied customers. And they're also going to know that if they see that wine on the shelf somewhere at $50, that customer is going to still feel like they got value for that by the glass at the restaurant. And so they may buy it at retail. They may buy it by the glass. They may buy it at a restaurant for $80 or $90 a bottle. And it really comes down to just getting more exposure for these wines to a broader audience. And so our mix of business is about 50-50 right now, and we'll continue to maintain that. I think a big part of that is that it maintains the brand integrity. Back of house, it's a bit of a pain in the ass on the accounting side. But overall, it is, I think, the right way to build and maintain a brand in the long term. And honestly, it's what I consider our biggest marketing expense. Everybody thinks like, oh, you're doing print ads, you're doing banner ads online, all that stuff. If you equate it all, it's, you're talking, a lot of lost revenue for that by the glass placement. And to stay very diligent with that is very hard for most people to do, because once you get on, the teat of retail, and you're making those higher margins, everybody's like, well, screw the on-premise. Let's pull the on-premise pricing and stick with retail. And that is the end of, or the beginning of the end of a brand, and often in most cases. So we're very focused on that, and it's been doing really great for both Quilt and Bell Gloss. To have that step up, once you go from a $12 pour, a $10 pour, and you hit that 20, and you're like, oh my God, I taste the value in this.
Right. Right.
It's human nature, right? We all we're all aspirational. We all want to do better. You go from, a used Toyota Civic to, a new, whatever, like say, a fancy car, a Cadillac or something.
Sure.
You don't want to go back down. And it's the same thing with wine. It's just, it's human nature. So getting them to step up over and over again, until they find what they love and know that luxury wine is accessible. It doesn't need to be $200-$300 a bottle. There's some amazing wines out there at $50, up to $100, even down in the $20 price category. So, what we have in our kind of $20 price segment is, Bowen, and Bowen. And I know I'm talking to a lot of markets that, you guys have a big competitor that we created, called Meiomi. But Bowen was our re-entrance into the Tri-County Pinot Noir game. So we built Meiomi up. We ended up selling that in about 2015. That funded our dreams for Copper Cane, and it really brought balance into the portfolio, balance into my life. And when the non-compete came up in 2019, we launched Bowen. And it is everything that Meiomi used to be. And I hate to say it like that, but things change once it gets into somebody else's hands, and there's costing and all that. And so we looked at it as, we have this huge opportunity to bring this, very kind of multi-dimensional, very diverse flavor profile, textural profile, Pinot Noir back out to the audience that once loved Meiomi. And it's been growing great. So Bowen was the first brand we created after the sale of Meiomi, and we named it Bowen, meaning the farm, because it was a way for us to say we're getting back into farming. We now had the funds to purchase more acreage, to plant more vineyards, to grow sustainably, and be able to manage all of our stuff internally. And so that's been my lifelong goal, really, is to be able to grow everything that we produce. And we're still working towards that. We're getting closer every year. And so Bowen is a testament to that. And it's just a knock your socks off, $20, retail, $12 by the glass. And really happy with where that's at right now. Another one of our brands that's been around for quite a while, actually one of the first brands we created under Copper Cane, was the Elawan. So Elawan is a Oregon project. I felt like we had confidence in the coast of California and what we were doing, and curiosity just got the best of me. And I thought, let's go to Oregon. Let's see what we can do up there. And taking our grape growing techniques, our winemaking techniques, and applying them to a very traditional mindset of an industry. Oregon is still very much in the wheelhouse of, we're the new world Burgundy. We're going to make our wines like Burgundy. And I've always had the belief that if you're trying to emulate another wine region, you're already in a losing battle. Try to showcase what Mother Nature gave you in your respective region. That's what we did with Bell Gloss from the beginning, and it did well for us. And what we were able to create out of Oregon with Elawan was a bit more of a fleshy style of Oregon Pinot. It's still got that beautiful minerality and really good brown spice tones, but it is a Copper Cane style Pinot Noir. It's got great front and mid palate, and beautiful balanced acidity on the finish. And I love the flavors. It's actually of the Pinots, I think my personal favorite food wine, just because of that elevated acidity. It really plays well. And so with Elawan, we also produce a Chardonnay and a Rosé, and that's going through a package revamp right now. Really excited to bring that out to tell the story of what the brand name means. So Elawan means good light. It was an old Breton word, or like a form of Old English, I suppose. to simplify it. And so it was actually a baby name that I found over the years in one of those baby name books. And it always stuck with me. I just thought it was a very beautiful, very feminine name. And I wanted to actually name one of my kids that. But I already had two girls, and I've got two girls and four boys. And so we never got
goodness.
I know. I'm getting ready for the next generation here.
Yeah, you are.
And so Elowan, I went back to it and I was like, well, what is the difference between what we're doing in California and what we're doing in Oregon? And it really came down to growing degree days and sunlight hours. You have lower growing degree days in Oregon than where we grow Pinot Noir in California. You have more sunlight hours in Oregon than what we have in California. So it was really about how the grapes are ripening. And they really do predominantly ripen through photosynthesis, whereas in California, we always have these dry heat spikes, especially towards the end of the season, where we get a little dehydration, a little desiccation, and kind of adds that richer roundness. And it's a style on its own, But in Oregon, you don't have that. You have this vibrancy that comes through, and it's all because of the coolness paired with the amount of sunlight they have. So to the extent of, at the longest day of the year, summer solstice, it has about 45 minutes more of sunlight than our most southern growing region. Compound that over days and weeks and months, and you have a profound impact on the way the grapes are ripening and the style of the wine. And so Elowan, meaning good light, was the name we gave it. And the package that's coming out is a depiction of those rolling coastal hills with rays of sun coming out from behind them. And I think it's a very impactful, beautiful package and does help tell the story. So very excited about that. Probably maybe 2-3 months before we get that out in the market now.
Okay. So like end of summer?
Yeah, early fall, maybe somewhere in there. And, there are a few other brands we do just, at our tasting room, like Kita Building One. But there is a new brand launch that we're doing, actually just did, and it's been doing very well out there just on its first release, and kind of started off as, we wanted a stepping stone for the Napa Valley quilt, because we can't make a cab at $20 at the level of quality we're doing. So we came out with a new brand called Thread Count. It's Thread Count by Quilt. We started off with a red blend, and it's a wine that satisfies a very broad array of palates. So this was the first time that we as a winemaking team actually went outside of our own little, microcosm where we all kind of like have an agreement on our palates and whatnot. At this point, the house palate thing is real. And so we went out and we gathered, like 20, 25 people from within the company, all age ranges, all levels of wine experience, people that don't drink wine. They're still on White Claw. They're 22 working in marketing too. A 60-year-old who is an avid lover of fine wine and looking for the geekiest stuff you can find out there. And so we got everybody in a room. We took our bench blends. So let's call it like first run about 5 bench blends, and then also had the 10 top red blends in that price category. Everything was blind, and we just said, okay, we want to know what everybody likes. We ranked them and did this a series of times as we were refining those 5 blends that we were making, until we got to a point where everybody, from the White Claw drinker to the experienced wine lover, everybody put it in their top 2 or 3. So 1, 2, or 3 placements. And that's what drove the blend decision. And a big reason for that was that, we felt like there is a miss for getting the younger generation into drinking fine wine. And, how do we do that and get that White Claw drinker to, when they're going out to dinner, have something a little bit classier, a little bit elevated, and then get them to get, into fine wine and move up and down the ladder there. So Thread Count has been doing just that. And it's hit the market, and really happy with how that's gone. We're going to be coming out with a Paso Robles Cabernet for that as well, and also a Sauv Blanc in the next year. So lots of exciting stuff. Those are kind of the core brands, I guess the 5 core brands that we have on the wine side right now. And not planning on doing a whole lot more of brand development. I think we got a pretty well filled out portfolio, but we do have 2 other projects coming up in the next 6 to 12 months. But we've also turned our focus onto spirits.
Let's talk about that too. I love, by the way, how you've made wine so accessible. Because I think a lot of the consumers, whether you're in a liquor store or even if you're at the local bar, it can be very intimidating, right? To look at the menu, to look at the selection, to know what's good. And so, to be able as a producer to make those wines that are delicious, that are exquisite, accessible is incredible.
Well, thank you. And it doesn't come without some hate. I will tell you that. So,
oh no.
and in the beginning, it was, of course, it's like hurtful when you're getting criticized, and then you realize, well, everybody's different, and
yeah,
there are some very geeky somms out there who think that what we do is atrocious, and that's totally fine with me because I don't like drinking whatever obscure white varietal from some corner of Europe that I've never heard of for an overly priced. I
agree with you. I agree with you 100%. And then what you're doing is, like you said, for those who are curious about wine, really giving them that roadmap on where to start and then what to try next, and really getting them interested in the entire category. So you really are doing a service to wine itself.
Well, we hope so. We'll keep on trying and evolving. And, as a side note, we recently got into social media, which is, I'm generally a private person. COVID kind of changed that just out of necessity. We started doing live streams like 3 a day. We were doing wine dinners. We were looking at like 100 people's dining rooms, while they're enjoying it was, what a weird time, right? But through that, I realized that there was a very powerful opportunity for us, not just as Copper Cane, but as an industry, where we don't have a lot of individuals that are really involved anymore. You might have winemakers, but from an ownership standpoint, number one, you have to be involved in everything, but then also be willing to put yourself out there. And that tie of a product to a person now is more important than ever. The consumers are looking for that. And so I realized, okay, I've got to kind of change my MO and get a little more comfortable with this. And I got comfortable through COVID. And then our social media director, she asked me, well, we're on Instagram. What do you think about getting onto TikTok? And I was like, not going to get on TikTok. Like that's dancing kids and whatever else. Right. And so she started showing me stuff, and she's like, it's becoming a little more educational, and there's nobody in the wine space on here. And I think that you can do well. And I was like, I'll give it a shot. We'll give it 6 months. And I give her an hour of my time once a week. She's got a list of stuff to shoot. She edits it all. And we try to mix in entertainment and education together. And it turned out to be a great blend. And we've gotten great feedback. We've also gotten, some naysayers and whatnot, but generally speaking, we get a lot of great feedback from consumers, young and old, getting kids, in their early 20s excited about wine. Comments like, I never thought I'd want to drink wine, but now that I'm hearing this stuff, I'm really excited to try my first bottle. And so we really hope that, we're giving like free lessons to other winery owners, and even if it's just a social media director, like I call it a character for a winery, a spokesperson for a winery, we'll bring them in and tell them what our strategy is and encourage them to get online so that there's more voices out there.
Absolutely.
Because I think it's an industry issue that we're a pretty dusty old, marketing type of industry. And if we can do something to affect change there and get people excited about it, then I think the whole industry will continue to thrive.
Yeah. And not just that. I mean, think about, something that you said earlier was, and, wine really brings together like community, right? And it's a lot about culture and about food and about friendship. And, it's so communal. It really is. And so if you can share that with the next generation and like, hey, yeah, it's not just flipping open a tab of, I'm not going to say the schmal, like you said, but it's something just a little more special than that, right?
It is. And it goes, I would say that wine by and large is the best beverage for food pairing. Everybody thinks like tacos need a Pacifico or a Corona. I think that tacos, like, if I'm doing carne asada street tacos, it tastes great with, a chilled, I know people are going to hate this comment, but a chilled bottle of Elawan Pinot. And it's just like the pairings are limitless. And really, as you said, everybody, you're sitting around a table, you're having a great time, you're enjoying good food, good company, and good ambiance, all that stuff. Wine is a part of it. And
Mm-hmm.
you don't really have a bad experience with wine. Wine is part of our culture, has been part of our human culture for, centuries, if not millenniums. But it is something that brings people together. There's not a lot of products to do that. And the industry itself is very insulated in the sense of having just a large group of good people. And I think it's one of the things I love about it. And it's at every level of the industry: vineyard, winery, distribution, and retail and restaurant, right? Where if you're a bad operator and you cross somebody the wrong way, people are quick to just say, "Oh, we're just going to stop working with you." And those people find their way out of the industry pretty quick. I've seen it happen time and time again.
Oh, yeah.
It's kind of like fuck around and find out.
Yeah. You're right. No, you're 100% right.
And so we're all in this together, and we're all watching out for each other. And, my destemmer goes down, I can call somebody up and they'll be like, "Oh yeah, you can borrow it tonight. I'll bring it over." So it's a great industry at all levels. And I think it'll continue to be that way, because at the end of the day, we're all getting together for a glass of wine over a meal. That's it,
Amen to that. Yes, you were right. And so let's talk about how do you then make that jump into spirits? How did that happen? It's terribly exciting. So talk to me about that.
Yeah, this one kind of just started off a little awkward. So I'm going to go back to like 2013. We at the Dairyman Vineyard over in Russian River. There's an old dairy there, which the property used to be a functioning dairy. So we wanted to turn that into a winery, but we didn't want it just to be about wine. So we wanted to take the components of Sonoma's agricultural history, which are grapes and wine, apples, and a creamery or dairy. So we had this whole design, and we had some issues with access into the property and, bike trail and whatever else. So it never got off the ground. But during that 2-year period where we were developing this project, I was like, well, I know for the apple thing, I don't want to do apple cider, and we're not going to make applesauce. And I've always loved Calvados. And so I thought, let's start making apple brandy. And we had a friend out in Modesto, and he had a distillery that he had just started. And so we started working with some old orchards here in Russian River, with Gravenstein and Golden Delicious apples were the two we started with. And we picked them, brought them to the winery, pressed them in our wine presses, fermented them with champagne yeast, did everything like we were making wine. We actually went through ML fermentation, which it is a bitch to get apple cider through ML fermentation. I was very surprised.
I bet.
There's a boatload of malic acid in apples. Anyway, so we got it through, and then we brought it to the distillery and had him do the first year was contract work. And so he did that, and we loved it. We were like, all right, let's keep going with this. And, he was running on a shoestring. And so we decided we'd invest into the facility and actually purchase the property. And he was managing his spirits, but also now our spirits. And as we started to get into it, and once we started putting other stills in there, it was like, well, let's send some wine over, make some brandy along with the apple brandy. And then we started growing our own corn and rye, and making our own mash bills, and making bourbon and rye. And then we began to play with single malts. Not like your traditional single malts. I'd say they're somewhere between the Japanese and more of a traditional single malt. They're not overly smoky. But that's the only thing we don't grow is the barley for the single malts. So that is something we buy from Admiral Maltings, and we have a number of expressions, but we only have one out currently. So most of the spirits are aged about 5 years. Some of them are 4, or one of them is 4. Everything else is 5+. So we have an apple brandy, which kind of started the whole thing. We call that Bishop's Eden. That is, it's a very expressive, very rich style. That is all in French oak. And then we have our bourbon and rye, and the brand for that is called Griffin and Grain. And I'll kind of give you an overarching idea as to the brand names and whatnot in a moment. And so we're using Merced rye, which is a native rye. And then we're using winter wheat and then 2-row barley on that. And then we've got our bourbon, which is red corn, 2-row barley, and winter wheat as well. And then the single malt, which we call Isla Khalifa, and that is cherry wood currently. And we have a number of other expressions like Maiden Voyage, Gallagher's Best, a number of ones that were developed here locally. And then our brandy itself is called Avray, and Avray is finished in Belglas Pinot Noir barrels, and it's quite a rich style of brandy. I think brandy is going to be the next big thing here in the States. I mean, as brown spirits are going to continue to grow.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. Just with the growth of cognac itself, the more awareness just outside of the larger brands. It's really getting into, and you mentioned Calvados as well. Calvados is one of my personal favorites. I've had the opportunity to go to Normandy and explore with distillers out there, and it was absolutely fascinating. So I think it's so cool what you're doing for these categories. It's awesome.
I mean, I cannot wait until there's a few more producers making, higher end brandies and apple brandies, because they're you taste them next to bourbon and rye, and it's just a little bit of a fresher, fruitier vibe, but you still get all those tones of oak that people love, and and I think it's going to have its day. It used to be our grandparents' drink, right? So,
yeah.
What's old and new again? So I think we're going to get back into it. So yeah, very, very exciting. So let's see. I'm trying to think of what else. Oh, the brand names themselves. So they all sound a little bit odd, but really the story of it is that everything is grown here in California. Everything's produced here in California. We're very much a craft distiller. And so when I was thinking about California, I was like, well, the history of California is something that a lot of people don't really know the details about. Like, where did the name come from? And that's a great story in itself. And maybe I'll preface it by saying that when I was in my early 20s, I was told to start collecting something, just as like a hobby. Like some older guy was like, start a collection of something that means something to you now. And, in 50 years, you're going to look back and be like, God, I'm really glad I was inspired by this when I was like 23. And now look at what I have. And so I started collecting California maps. And that was just, it actually turned into kind of like how the establishment of the Western United States went through maps. So you kind of see from just barren land over to, what we have today. One of the most fascinating maps was that California was depicted as an island. And that was a cartography mistake back in like the 1400s, 1500s. But it lasted for over 200 years. And so going kind of deeper into that story, there was a fictional novel in the late 1400s called Las Sergas de Esplandian. The name doesn't really matter, but the point of the story is that there was a fictional character in that story named Queen Calafia, and she had an army of female warriors and an army of 500 griffins. She lived in this terrestrial paradise that had shores of gold and pearls, and they were laden in gold and whatever else. So it was a very popular novel for Spain during those years. And during those years, Spain was exploring the west coast of North America and mapping it out. And so they thought that they had found this island, like this Garden of Eden Island, which was the Baja Peninsula. And so they named it Isla de California, after the Queen Calafia. And so that's where it got its first name. And so on these old maps, you'll see that it says Isla de California on it. It's actually the oldest state name that in the nation because of that. And so I was looking at that. I was like, we're all California grown, produced, and everything. This is our home. How do we kind of tell that story through the brands? And so that's kind of where Griffin and Grain comes in. And Isla Khalifa itself is kind of a hybridized version of the Isla de California. And Bishop's Eden, kind of a play on, the Garden of Eden, Bishop being the overseer, And so they all have kind of this tie in together that really does go back into the history of California and how it got its name.
I love that. I want to have you back on just to talk about your maps. I think I have like troll dolls, like what I collected when I was a kid. Nothing as interesting as what you just said. I had no idea. And I bet a lot of our listeners are probably really surprised to hear where the name of California came from. It's incredibly cool. And then how you tie that back in, right? I think it seems to me like you have that really cool spirit about yourself, Joe, that really is tied into your family, into your heritage, and always paying homage to.
Well, thank you. It is something that we really do try to maintain. I don't want to just, put products out there that just have a cool name that some think tank came up with. Everything needs to have meaning. It all has to have purpose. And once you get something, like the product is made and you feel good about it, what does it mean to you? What does it mean to the community? And then you start thinking about what the name is and what the storyline of it is. And I think it's a much more organic way to go. And I do hope people appreciate it. I know that it's a little more complicated. It's a little harder to let that story like resonate and be easily accessible to most people out there because there's so many stories anyways. Yeah. So, but I think that at minimum, there's the genuine nature of it. And there's also the, ownability of it, that we can really, own that story, and we can go ahead and tell it. And as long as people understand that it's genuine and they don't recall the details, that's fine with me, just as long as our expression of the genuine nature of it comes through.
Yeah, I think that you're doing a great job.
Well, thank you. I'll keep trying to not fuck it up.
Well, I think that's what we're all trying to do every day. So
that's why whenever we're still a pretty small company. And so whenever we have a new employee come in, we do a little lunch for them, and we kind of grill them and roast them all at the same time. It's kind of an HR nightmare, but our HR team is pretty cool. So my one line to every single one of them is, the job is really easy as long as you don't fuck up. And it's funny. I mean, we like mistakes just as much as we like successes, because you learn from them. But it's become kind of one of the joking mantras of the company.
Well, it should be on a shirt and sold. Yeah. In your tasting room. Copper Cane Wines and Spirits. Don't fuck us up. That's right. I would buy one. That's fun. So can you leave our listeners with just some advice? I think you'll have a lot of folks listening today that are new, maybe to the wine industry, really admiring your story here. Can you leave them with just a little bit of advice as they jump into a wine career, whether it be even working in a liquor store and learning about wine? Maybe they have aspirations to own their own winery. Maybe they're just, behind the bar pouring the wine. What advice can you give to them about the category and really jumping into that passion?
So it's a great question. There's so many things that I'm thinking about, but I'll take it piece by piece. I'm thinking that if you're going to be in the sales part of wine, there are so many different avenues you can go, and just find the place that you feel most comfortable. Is it on premise? Is it off premise? Is it back of house? Are you wanting to deal with customers directly in a retail store? Do you want to be a sommelier? All that stuff. But I think, and trying them all and figuring out what you love the most, what you do best at, and what fulfills, your needs. But then also keeping an open mind and understanding that there are so many different palate preferences out there. And if you're being singular with what wines you put on a list or that you're pushing out there, it's a disservice to the industry, I think. And so understanding that if somebody walks into a store and says, I like this type of Chardonnay, like I want the biggest, butteriest, oaky, Chardonnay you got. Mm-hmm. And if you're like, okay, well, I prefer Chablis, I think you should try Chablis. And there are a lot of somms out there and that are always trying to divert people to what the somm wants them to drink rather than what the people want to drink. And so better understanding of what the customer themselves wants. And that holds true for the restaurant. If you're in a restaurant, if you're in a retail store, also if you're in, if you're selling into a retail store or a restaurant, letting them know, like, if there's a geeky som that's got a lot of esoteric stuff, you got to, pitch it as, you need some also mainstream stuff. You're missing out on, a big part of your clientele that knows exactly what they want. They want the reliable, the reliable regions or the reliable varietals. So I think that those are some of the things, is just keeping balance with everything. So I'd give that advice. And then when it comes to all of it, I would just say try. I mean, I've seen people that are hampered by overthinking, right? So, and that goes in everything. You take all of the elements of what you're thinking about. If it's a business idea, say you do maybe want to start making wine, it's just do it. Like the old adage, like Nike's, just do it. and what I've seen is that people will overthink and assess and analyze, and then their opportunity is passed. And then they miss the boat, and then it's on to the next one. So, I mean, if you were to put a percentage on it, I'd say if you feel 50% good, like analytically, about what you're wanting to do, and then you got a good gut feel, that's a pretty good start. So 50, 60% and a good gut feel, I'd jump in with both feet, take the risk. You'll learn no matter what, but if you don't try, it's never going to happen. So when it comes to winemaking, I think a big part of it is, and I encourage people to do this all the time. A lot of people think it's a very complicated thing. You can go online and buy your first winemaking kit. It may be Chardonnay concentrate and, a little, carboy and whatever other tools you need just to start a fermentation. And you may ruin that wine. It may taste like vinegar, or it may be something good, but you try it once, you get more and more involved in it. And then eventually you'll have a wine that's good. And then you can ramp up from there. I think, one of my favorite stories is the Costa Brown story. Those were two guys that they were servers in a restaurant, and they were like, we love wine. We want to try and make it. They made some wine in their garage. I think they bonded their garage so they could actually legally make wine there. Started off with a couple barrels, got some good scores. Their wines were just fucking awesome, honestly. Like, those were some of my more inspiring wines in the late 90s when I started tasting Pinot, or their vintages from the late 90s. And they're really one of the OGs of California Pinot as far as I'm concerned. So, they eventually realized, wow, we've got an actual business on our hands, and they grew, and, they eventually sold. They have started their own projects respectively, but they eventually sold. And, say the estimate there was, these two guys that were just servers and, post college, making a, fine amount of money, but not lighting the world on fire. And then they sell a brand for like $40 million because they just followed a passion. They tried it and they got into it, and they're still doing what they love to this day. So, I think it comes down to that, just trying even at the smallest scale, and learning through the process and not giving up on it. I mean, if you absolutely hate winemaking, then, try it once and then just say, not my thing, but it's always worth a try.
Well, Joe, on that note, I want to thank you for coming on Served Up, and I would love to have you back again.
Absolutely. I would love to.
You're an awesome guest. And I want to wish you just some great health and a lot of peace, man. So thank you for being on the show.
Well, likewise. Thank you for having me. And I don't know, maybe if you're open to it, we'll have you on our podcast at some point. So it's called Go With Your Palate. I've got to plug it in there. We haven't actually publicized it yet, but I think we got maybe a dozen things we go into. It's about wine, also entrepreneurship, and then we call it whatever the fuck else. So
I would love, hey, have me on. We can have some other conversations for sure. I think
exactly.
We're gonna be good friends.
Let's get into the whatever the fuck else and have some fun. Well, thank you so much,
man. I'm here for it. Thank you so much, Joe. Cheers to you, man.
Cheers. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening. Served Up is brought to you by Southern Glazers Wine and Spirits. Produced by Zunu.online. Music by We Killed the Lion can be found on Spotify. Make sure to subscribe to be notified of future Served Up episodes. Cheers!